Hello, everyone. This is the Backup Chargers. My name is Faithless Menace. This is the first video we're putting together on this channel. This is Vow Lorraine deck profile. This is one I'm going to be taking to the Yetis here. The Yetis Regional on March 30th. And what's going to be happening with this is I'm pre-recording this to make sure that everything's going to be going according to plan, have time to actually get this out, and hopefully I do well so I can show you all what's going on with it. Either way, it's going to get released, and we'll kind of see the performance afterwards. I'll leave a little after-action report so you can see what's going on with it and how it's doing. Pretty proud of this brew, though. So without further ado, let's just get on with it. So we are Spirit of Fire. The only good cards that we are looking for are Fire and Norm, so this works perfectly. We're not going to level 3. We are just, 90% of the time, we're just a level 1 deck. We go Lorraine, Wandering Warrior, because there's a very good zero-cost weapon that got printed in Abyssal Heaven. The level 2 comes out occasionally, but really isn't too useful. You just run it in case the stars align and you just have the resources, and that's how your stats kind of end up going for kill. The weapon I'm talking about off of level 1 is, of course, Hwaji of Heaven's Rise. This card was kind of scoffed at because we were all kind of saying, oh, if this is the double-sided UR pull, I'm going to be kind of mad. And in fact, the backside is kind of a nothing burger. Sure, you can use this. I don't think it's very good, if I'm being honest. It's fine. But the front side being the fact that unique warrior allies I control can attack with it is really huge, because that means that a lot of my lineup can just get a lot of big damage early, which is exactly what you want in an aggro deck like this. The other weapon, the big one the deck's named after, is Sword Saint's Vow. This card is kind of a meme, but is honestly really powerful if you can build around it, which I kind of have. You can see a little bit down here. Sword Saint's Vow starts off as basically a 1-1 because it gets +1 attack for every durability counter on it, and it does start as an 0-1 weapon. And then every time you activate a craft card, it gets 2 extra durability. And then every time you hit, it loses 2 durability. So reading the card in a vacuum makes it sound balanced, but it is anything but, really. And then we also are running Drawn Blade. It is a 1-cost that on enter draws a card, which is usable. It's a weapon, so I can use it with Blazing Throw. It's extra damage if need be. It's shockingly useful in the right situations. For non-weapons, we are looking at GCR and the 3 baubles. You really don't need a whole lot of material deck cards just because you are not looking to have a long game. If you are, you can grind it out, but it's a lot harder once you get there. Terrafring is what I call kind of the 12th card in there because of that reason. It is very useful. Don't get me wrong, it is still a Terrafring, so going into allies matchups, it always feels good. But not if you would rather find a card that actually gets you kill, but you just have some of the game sometimes. So I like to include it as a card in the main deck there. And then, of course, Smoke Bombs. So Smoke Bombs gets over taunts, gets over intercepts, and draws a card. So it basically goes neutral, and you kind of stagger it. So sometimes it does make Gildas math a little hard. Sometimes it makes it a lot easier. But it is kind of nice just to have to make sure you can actually get kill over 1 to 2 taunts on board. Next for the main deck. We'll go over the allies next. So as mentioned, we are running 3 copies of Gildas. It is a 3-cost 4/3 most of the time. It is not always easy to get it balanced in this list, but it is consistent enough where I find it's basically just the best option that we have available. You don't really need anything else too fancy. It just gets the job done. It kills Frostborn Paladins. It deals with a lot of stuff that is just a little problematic for the deck and can always just start swinging for game. Every card in this deck essentially has to require an answer, and that makes it very difficult for the opponent to actually respond to things properly. We are also running Shang, so she's very nice. So what's excellent about her is she is a 3-cost 2/3, which is all you really need. Just like we're back in FTC, ALC meta, it's a 3-cost 2/3. That's all you really need. It does have Imbue 3, and with this, that means you must reveal 3 norm cards. You don't always, you rarely actually need it to be imbued. It's nice when you do because it does mean it's a safer turn one play. You can be fairly certain it's not going to get cleared. Or if it is, your opponent will have to do some kind of shenanigan, waste a better form of removal on it than they really should. Importantly, it's also a warrior unique ally, unlike Gildas, so it can use the Hwaji. So this is another card that hits up a little bit harder. Speaking of, we are running Sunsei. So Sunsei is amazing with Hwaji. If you are on turn 2, you level to Lorraine, you get Hwaji out, and then you play Sunsei. It puts durability in Hwaji, and it gives it +1 attack. And Sunsei, as another warrior unique ally, can also use the Hwaji that he himself is buffing, essentially making him a 3-cost 3/4, which is very above rate and hits very hard, and in combination with your other allies, for example the Shangchang, makes it hit for 4 if you have both, which is just excellent. We have Arthur as well. Arthur is another card that needs an answer and is hard to remove. Sensei as well for toughness, a little bit harder for them to deal with. Arthur just straight up has immortality for the turn. Turn 1, if you're going first, Arthur is still just an excellent first turn play. He buffs everything. He's just very efficient for what he does. And again, necessitates an answer, which is very important in this deck. Onto the kind of draw and float package. We're running 4 copies of Library Witch, 4 copies of Stalwart Shieldmate, 3 copies of Flame Rune, and 3 Clumsy Apprentice. Now, these are all essentially cards that can either stall a little bit in the case of Library Witch and Shieldmate, or apply a little bit of pressure in the case of Clumsy and Flame Rune, but still work really well with Creative Shock and Cremation Ritual. That way we can kind of churn through the deck a little bit more. Hasty Messenger, also part of that lineup. That lets us just, again, apply a little bit early pressure, along with get enough float to not go minus in influence. That is a big thing. If you're in a game where you're constantly paying out of memory to materialize Lorraine or Sword Saint's Vow, then you have a much harder time actually keeping cards up to be able to go for kill. So if you have float, it's worth quite a lot in this list. We're also running 4 Blazing Lunge. Now, Blazing Lunge is not necessarily good as a 4 of. I might cut it down to 3, but it's still just very solid. It's the only card in the deck that's affected by Nullifying Lantern, which is completely fine with me, because if they're playing Nullifying Lantern, that means the rest of my stuff is going to be getting through. The Blazing Lunge is very good just because you can bash 2 fire cards to make the damage unpreventable. And even if you don't 3-cost for 4 damage on an attack, is still really solid. Diversifying the damage output in this deck is huge. Between champion attacks, allies, blazing throws, etc., you can do a lot of damage in 3 or 4 different sources, which makes it really difficult for the opponent to do anything. In terms of actions, aforementioned Blazing Throw, it's 4 damage, eats a weapon. Oh no, you're going for kill, who cares about the weapon? Creative Shock, Cremation Ritual, again, churning through the deck. 2 copies of Deflecting Edge. This is sort of just a meta choice right now, so Deflecting Edge is just very good into allies. You can use it with Stalwart Shieldmate and Library Witch as well to just blink a whole lot of attacks, which is very good, very efficient. And then obviously if it costs 0, it's doing quite a lot of work, which can also help balance Gildas a little bit easier. Not very consistent as a 2 of, but it's still something to keep in mind if you have it. For the craft cards, we are running 3 playsets of Tempered Steel, Temper and Flames, and Owned by Fire. So we'll go worst to best. Tempered Steel. This is a 1-cost slow speed, put a durability counter on something, and it has float. That is the only thing that matters on here. It has float, and it is cheap enough to be playable. This will effectively put 3 durability counters on Sword Saint's Vow, because of the 2 it gets just from you activating a craft action card. So it's effectively making the Sword Saint's Vow hit for 4, if that's the only card you've played. Temper and Flames. Very similar. Target weapon +1 attack till end of turn, get a durability counter on it. No float, but that's completely fine. Extra damage is really nice, especially since that means it's hitting. Sword Saint's Vow is hitting for at least 5 off of that. It basically gives an extra +4 for that turn, which is pretty huge for only 1 cost and not actually removing anything. Unlike the Blazing Toe, where you have to eat up a resource, this is just free, basically. And then the best card is Owned by Fire. You want to see as many of these as often as possible. So this gets a sword weapon +2 attack till end of turn. Class bonus get a durability counter. Importantly, the other two can be used on Huaji. This can only be used on Sword Saint's Vow and technically Drawn Blade. There are some cases where it matters, but not typically. In most cases, you're going to want to hold up 3 cards, one of them being Owned by Fire at the end of your turn. When your turn comes around, if you can use Owned by Fire during your prereq right after materializing Sword Saint's Vow, then that means it's getting +2 temporary attack, +3 durability. So Sword Saint's Vow is hitting for 6 before you even pick up your cards, which means if you have a second one, it's hitting for 11. And then if you have Tempered Steel or Tempered Flames, you're hitting for even more just off of a single sword attack. And most people aren't really running the correct interaction to deal with Sword Saint's Vow right now, which is really nice. That's why I'm playing this right now. The only cards you really need to be worried about are Baby Green and some Seiryu lists. Occasionally you'll run across a couple Zephyrs. That is a pretty nice little tempo swing for the opponent. It's not the end of the world, but you do have to bear in mind that you can kind of get outed by that. Fracturize is the big one, though. Fracturize is very scary for this list. That can mess up your game plan. However, if they're wasting cards to fracturize your stuff, you're probably doing a pretty good job, because the only lists that are really running around with fracturize is Daochan Fractals, so you're kind of in a nice situation if they're not using that to get an extra fractal for themselves. And in terms of sideboard cards, we are running 1 copy of Nullifying Mirror. This is just to deal with wind matchups. Occasionally you might want it if you come across a Genbu or so, but not especially. This is mostly just to make sure that on your turn you can deal with Veiling Breezes, and then also the new Wind Diana list. They're running a card that has an imbue, suppress an attacking ally, or I should say return an attacking ally to hand, I believe, which this will stop, which is very nice. We're running Safeguard Amulet. This is another card just to kind of help deal with the Water Daochan list. Arisana as well. It helps with a couple different matchups. It is generic enough where it will just work for a lot of stuff. As long as it's not allies, this will help. Speaking of, if you're not playing it against allies, Coronation Ceremony is very nice. Main use case, there's 2. First is you're paying 3 for it, and you're targeting yourself. All of a sudden, you have Spell Shroud for the turn. This essentially acts like a negate against a lot of decks, and sometimes multiple, depending on how they order the stack. So this will be very nice to just stop a bunch of damage and just buy an extra turn sometimes. This also can let you swing for game a little bit safer, because all of a sudden you can swing with Sonsei, they try to kill it with a Refracting Missile or such, and you pay 1, and all of a sudden it has Spell Shroud. And they either pay for another another big source of damage, which is then wasting their kill cards, or they take the damage, which is very nice. 3 copies of Raise the Land. So this came up mostly against my teammates that we're testing with, but there is a deck running around that uses the domains Dawn of Ashes and Shucheng. They both put a pretty heavy strain on paying costs on cards, taxes things quite a bit. Raise the Land is really nice because it is float, so if you're able to kill DOA with this, then this will be the float to pay for the Shucheng if they happen to have both in play. And then it's just very nice. And I'll typically side out Flaming Swordsman as well, because it being non-class bonus floating memory is actually pretty huge. You can use this if they even turn 1, they play one of those domains, have this in your opener, all of a sudden you have enough to be able to level up to 1 and kill a card that was just messing with your game plan the rest of the game. So it's very, very nice in that matchup. Lastly, we have Staggering Strike. So this card has been around since A&B and not seen a whole lot of play, but it's really efficient, I think. So it's similar to Blazing Lunge. It's a 3 damage attack. However, instead of 4 damage, it's only hitting for 3. It has True Sight, and on champion hits, remove 3 prep from the hit champion. If you're playing against any assassin list, you're gonna want this card. It is very, very efficient for what it does. If your opponent took any amount of time on their first turn getting some prep counters, for a second turn they're still holding on to them, this forces them to use it or lose it, which is a very nice tempo swing. And then the True Sight doesn't need to come up too often. However, it's another thing to help with some wind matchups in case they're running Innervate Agility, because they can give their whole board stealth. And that's the only function on that card that actually matters, because there's no spells that target in this list. Blazing Throw is a skill for the damage, which is excellent, so Spell Shot doesn't save them. Everything else is an attack. The only spells that can be negated with a null spell are Creative Shock and Cremation Ritual, which are kind of big blowouts if it happens, but other than that, there's nothing else that really gets affected by it. So it's poised really well into the cards that people are running in this meta right now, which is why I'm running this list in the first place. This entire deck is basically a meta call. If you're running this at locals, it can also do really, really well sometimes. Just depends what everyone's running. But yeah, that's it for the deck list. We'll see how I do at the regional, and I'll come back here in just a second and tell you how I did. Okay, so I am back after playing in the Yetis. I made a couple mistakes, so unfortunately I did not top, but I was damn close. So the list remained the exact same, but I did make one change. I took out a Blazing Lunge, so it's down to only 3, and now up to 4 Arthurs, because finding more Arthurs throughout the whole big tournament like that was just much more relevant. Other than that, list performed really well. The only thing I would change is probably cutting level 2 Lorraine. I did not even consider leveling up into her once. It just was not something I really cared for. Not even anything I'd really change her out for. Maybe even just main decking Safeguarding Amulet, and then I have room for more sideboard cards. And then in terms of sideboard, I might end up, I'll probably cut Razorland. My testing partners were a little bit more domain focused, so this was, Zhu Chang and DOA and such, so I was a little bit more focused on that. But other than that, rest of the list is really solid. Coronation Ceremony was really clutch at keeping some allies alive and myself. Staggering Strike just destroyed some of these assassin lists. Got exactly 3 prep off someone, and it felt so good to do it. Everything else about this list just feels really solid. Every single game I played, I felt like I was the one in control of whether or not I won, not that anything was out of my hands. My final record was 5-1-2. I faced a pretty good range. I did not face any fractals, which, good and bad, that's fine either way. I did fight robots. I fought Water Arisana. I played against a Fire Suzaku Guoja list in the feature match in round 7. My only loss was to a... I actually don't remember what exactly the loss was to. I do know I tied into a Fire Merlin list. That was kind of rough. That was my fault for tying, because I should have had kill, but I did not sequence my plays properly at the end there. I could have gone Gildus to get closer to kill. I would have gotten an extra 1 damage out of it, which is exactly what I was short by. So always count your kill before you play cards, I guess. And then my last round, I for some reason decided to ID, which bit me in the butt pretty hard. I was not doing my math properly for that one. I thought I was safe to bubble in, and I was definitely not. I got 19th overall, so A little bit of a shame. Really felt like this deck is definitely top cut worthy. But other than that, I feel like I did a really solid performance. So let me know what you think of the deck in the comments down below. Have a good one.